welcome back to the Irish Racing YouTube channel. Another episode of Formscan in association with Tony Bet. And I'm delighted to be joined by Tanya Stevenson ahead of a jam-packed weekend of racing. Tanya, I was kind of finding it hard to pick the running order from this one. There's so much going on. It's going to be a great weekend.
Yeah, you've said it already. We've got to highlight every single meeting because there's goodies here, there, and everywhere. Whether it be Doncaster, Newcastle, and Newbury, it's just full of goodies. Fairyhouse at the weekend. I didn't know where to look.
Yeah, it's all the way through on Saturday anyway. In particular, what the plan is so far. We're going to start Saturday with the Fighting Fifth, go into the Carwell Gold Cup, formerly known as the Hennessy, and then me and Tanya are both going to pick a few highlights from the rest of the cards on Saturday because there's so much to go for. And then we'll concentrate solely on Fairyhouse for Sunday. So, like I said, we'll start off first in the 210 at Newcastle, the Fighting Fifth. Grade 1 Fighting Fifth. A few more champion hurdlers coming out here. Unfortunately, no Constitution Hill for Nicky Henderson, but luckily he had Sergino waiting in the wings to take the favourites position here. But definitely no walkover for the Henderson favourite. Willie Mullins also turns up with dual Grade 1 winning novice hurdler Mystical Power, now in the Rich Richie colours, which his mother carried to victory at the champion hurdle, I think 2016. Hard to believe that's 9 years ago now, Tanya, but that feels a lot more recent than that. But they're the two main market protagonists, Sergino, Mystical Power. Sergino, I suppose, on ratings has to actually improve to beat Mystical Power. He's rated £2 below, but there's definitely a bit of a superstar aura coming out of Seven Barrows about this Sergino, isn't there?
Yeah, there definitely is. And Sergino, I think, happened to be the horse that was alongside Constitution Hill in that gallop. But this is Nicky's race. That's all we can say, really, from the off. He's won it 8 times previously, so it is his race. And you tend to look at this to see whatever Nicky's running. He's won it 8 times. As I mentioned, the first time was a Landing Light. Now, Sergino, back in January, danced all over Burdett Road. And when you sort of try and align that kind of form, that was so impressive. And then Nicky went into that lull and nothing was going right for him in March or really in April. And to see Sergino do what he did then at Aintree, despite the lull, just showed you the caliber of horse that Sergino is. And you said, like, by the rating, he's got to improve. He will love Newcastle because the way that he sort of had his slick running at Aintree. Newcastle really is for those to show a little bit of speed. It's got a lovely, long, forever straight, which is great, which I think will also suit Mystical Power. Only beaten once in 6 races, and that was the Supreme to Slade Steele, but soon exacted revenge on that rival. I thought in the Supreme he never looked comfortable, but was brave and courageous by getting so close. And then I went back and watched all his races again. And the further he goes, he looks as though he's going to stay further, because the further he goes, the better his jumping gets and the slicker he gets. So these two at the top of the market are, well, it's just mouth-watering, isn't it? Really, really mouth-watering. But Mystical Power's got to tighten up his hurdling. That's not wrong to critique a horse of such greatness, and Sergino's got to get a little bit stronger. But the time to tackle these horses is when they're coming out for the first time. And I'm going to go completely left field. I appreciate these two might go so far clear of the one that I'm going to pick out because of ratings, but Lump Sum has already had a race. Sam Thomas is flying at the moment. This is a big day for Dylan Johnson, trying to get his first Grade 1. We've seen Lump Sum win the Dovecote at Kempton, speedy track, and then he won the Welsh Champion Hurdle, which is a complete opposite that at Foss Lass. But he beat Steel Ally, and we've seen Steel Ally win at Haydock last week. So the form has certainly been frank. I know he's got to find so much more in form, because we saw Lump Sum in that Aintree race kind of race up against the big guns. He didn't run too badly. He just hurdled so badly the last 2 hurdles, Lump Sum. But in here at such a big price, and there's still 8 runners, so I'm being rather cheeky I'm looking for my third place. I'm in splinters sitting on the fence. If I had to pick one out of the big two, I'd go Mystical Power. But if I'm stepping aside, and I'd love to see Lump Sum step up.
Probably not a bad way to look at this, to be fair. You've got the 8 runners, like you said, so 3 places, lump sum 11 to 1, could even be bigger in other places as well. So probably not a bad shout. I'm with you though. Actually, to be honest, at the start of the week, if you asked me, I probably would have said Sir Gino, but I was actually in Willie's on Wednesday, and he just seemed like, I think all the way through last year, they seemed to kind of think that Mystical Power maybe, you know, not as good as it might be expected from former son of Annie Power by Galileo, but this year the mood seems to have maybe switched a small bit in Plus Sutton. I think Willie sounded really, really keen on this lad. He thinks, even he was asked about his jumping, and he seems to think he's after improving in that regard. He said he's really, really slick over his hurdles when he's school this year. So just on that alone, I think I'd side with Mystical Power, but I definitely wouldn't be taking Sir Gino lightly at all. Coming from Nicky, like you said, he likes to dominate this race, and even the decision not to send him novice chasing is probably vital as well, because, you know, you imagine he would have been probably vying for favouritism for the Arkle with Ballyburn. But yeah, I think Mystical Power, just judging on comments from Willie and a few others in the camp who seem to think that this horse is definitely on the upward curve and could be possibly a bit of a dark horse in that champion hurdle picture, which is looking really exciting at the moment. But we'll move on from there. So it's lump sum each way, and we're both Mystical Power maybe from the big two. But we'll go on to Newbury now next. We'll stay with the big races for now, and the Coral Gold Cup is on at 3 o'clock in Newbury on Saturday, I think. So let's get the card up here now. And again, in this one, 14 runners declared. Sam Brown tops the weights there for Anthony Honeyball and Freddie Gingle. But it's the Irish Challenger Senior Chief, I think, who's vying for favouritism at the moment for Henry de Bromhead, about 6 to 1. But Broadway Boy, I think, joint favourites here now. I'm just seeing they're kind of renewing a rivalry from Cheltenham, I suppose, Tanya. But there's a bit of a swing in the weights here, I think, which will bring them a lot closer. What was your thoughts on the Coral Gold Cup?
Well, I'm going to, as usual, surprise a few people. But let's go back to that Cheltenham race where Broadway Boy does what Broadway Boy does best. I think he gives too much of himself. He's such a giving horse. He'll go out there and give his all and some, and he'll do that again here at Newbury. And what he did at Cheltenham, he allowed Senior Chief to run off the back of him, so it was quite sweet, and as you say, quite a swing in the weights. Now obviously Senior Chief adapted and acted well with the cheek pieces on the first time at Cheltenham, so that's good news for the supporters. But now you're closer in the weights to all these big boys. Broadway Boy, the one thing I've got a little worry of, Broadway Boy runs exceptionally well at Cheltenham. I don't know what the Broadway Boy around Newbury will look like. Well, it's perfectly fine. It'll probably be fine because he runs better in races. Either he's cracking along in front or those in front allow him just to sit behind. But my one little nag in my head, and this is totally unfair to him perhaps, is that he's better at Cheltenham. So I will put that to one side. Or perhaps, why are we complicating matters? Because last year's team of Jamie Snowden and Gavin Sheehan, they had That's All Right Gino win last year. This year they have Colonel Harry, who is a grade 1 performer. Now, yes, I get the fact that he hasn't got the grade 1 win in his repertoire yet, but he was against Le Patron, but also he's been running up against the likes of Great Dawning, Nickelback. Just mentioning those horses, those really speed front-running horses, and he's been able to be competitive even with Elatea Tomp, which is a big call. And he's not going to be lugging around 12 stone here. He's sort of, I would say, taking a step down in class, Colonel Harry, so you might not want to complicate matters. Venetia's in form. She's got Victorino in the race, but I wonder whether he likes going this way round, because when he's put, say at Cheltenham, his poor races is when he's been running left-handed, so I'd worry there. Now let's hone in on the horses that I do like. Galia de la Toe was my Grand National horse. She sulks though, and in the best case possible. I don't know what happened to her at Exeter. She was on a penultimate start before the Grand National. She was in a race that she ought to have been really, really competitive, and if not won by a wide margin. And I think she just sulked. And then when you saw a run at Aintree, it was a different horse again. It was a wonderful Gallia Toe that had finished second to Silver Lining in the Warwick Classic chase. And then when you go through her form, she's better when she's racing against the boys. When she's racing in her own sex, she sort of doesn't want to, her form is lesser. So that's just a real anomaly. However, the one worry with Gallia de la Toe, mares don't often run in this race, a bit like the Betfair Chase last week. They don't often run, and that's why I think we've only had one winner, and that was back in 1958, Kirsten. The horse I'm going to pick is because it resonates with me on its run, and that is the fact that we've only, I think Eddie Harty, when he had the training license himself, only had one previous runner at Newbury.
I like the sound of this. I'm on the same line as you, I think.
Prince and Plans in the McManus colours in the year that My Tent or Yours won the Betfair Hurdle. Prince and Plans was Eddie Harty's only previous Newbury runner. Now, when on the dual licence, they've only had one British runner, and that was a mare's hurdle at Cheltenham in April, and it ran really well. I think Empire Delight. Now, I watched Grandira Bello beat Tire Kicker and et al. Last time out. I cannot believe that horse was carrying 12 stone. I mean, it ran through the field. Well, it was running in contention, and it came through to win. If you were looking at the race for the first time, you'd think, oh, that's the bottom weight coming through, sailing through in a really competitive race. And then you go through the form, see the ability of Grandira Bella, and you think 12 stone. Well, I traced all the way back to the point to points, and there were really 3 strong point to points, very first running. Grandira Bella was only having 8th chase race, 11th race overall, and starting to go up in distance as well. And I think if you look at the races that Grandira Bella has been running over the further distance, it's been really excelling. There's a couple when they drop down in distance, it hasn't liked it, but goodness me, that was 12 stone. And I see that it's got a rating here of 147, got 11 stone 7. And the fact that Eddie Harty doesn't really have too many runners over here full stop and under the dual light. This is huge, the price each way, huge, because I think there's so much been concentrated at the top of that Cheltenham form with Broadway Boy and Senior Chief. I'm Grandira Bella because Tire Kicker is a pretty solid performer, and all those behind as well. And we're going to see hopefully one of them run really well on the Sunday at Fairyhouse.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same lines as you. I thought Granero Bello here, 18 to 1, I think 20 to 1 in places. Yeah. It looks a massive price. And even that the last one you were saying in Galway, like Stuzzakini was back in third that day. He was giving him £8. Yeah. He went out and won the Troy Town next time as well. So the form of it looks really strong. And even listening to comments from connections afterwards, I think they were half surprised that he was able to win that day. Like it was probably just an introduction on as more as anything else. And this sounded like it was kind of a long-term target for him, and kind of echoing what you said, his novice form was good. He was kind of running against the likes of the Devil's Coachman. He beat Max Charm, I think, winning his beginner's chase. So yeah, I think Grandero Bello were definitely on the same lines there. I think he looks a massive price each way in the Coral Gold Cup for the Hearties. So hopefully we're both on a winner with that one. But I think we will move on then for the rest of Saturday. You had a couple of highlights. I think the first one was a Tony Martin runner in Newcastle. It was always one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, because I think it's set up beautifully for Zanabad. And this is the one I'm talking about. Now, I appreciate we've got the Skyjack Hijack in the race, which has been amazingly handled by Jenny Candlish, amazingly. And the handicappers still may get hold of Skyjack Hijack here. Now, what Skyjack Hijack will do will go out really quickly out in front, and that's what's earned it 5 wins already, and this could be win number 6. I do not doubt that. However, Sandabad, it's, as you will know, and everyone watching Wells know, is a very capable long distance flat horse. Finished 3rd in the Chester Cup, finished 6th in the Ascot Stakes. and then also finished 6th in the Irish Cesarewitch. Now, in that Irish Cesarewitch, carried more weight than Nürburgring and more weight than Comfort Zone, and they are graded hurdle winners. And the Nürburgring was only about not too far ahead, and Comfort Zone was not too far behind. There are only 2 that I picked out. There are other hurdle performers that Zanderbad was very close to in that Irish Cesarewitch. And coming into this, I do appreciate that Zanderbad is still a maiden over hurdles, 6 runs over hurdles and still a maiden. But the way that this is going to be run like a flat race with all the speed that Skyjack Hijack will do, this will, I think that Tony's, the team have looked at it in the same effect, but if there's going to be a race he needs to be drawn through into, this is ideal. Now, he might not be good enough to pick up the multiple winner, but I'm really liking the look of Zanderbad here.
Very good. And Tony Martin and Daniel King already had success in the UK. I think they had a Cheltenham winner a few weeks ago as well. Daniel's a really good rider, brother of former champion apprentice Connor King as well. So definitely a claimer to watch out for. But we'll go on to your next one. I think it was the 2 o'clock in Doncaster, and it was Coast Guard Station for Henry Oliver.
Coast Guard Station's got a bit of an attitude, but has got plenty of ability within this sphere. He was 5th at Hexham over hurdles. You can see that 5th on the form figures. That was behind a Nicky Richards horse called Florida Dreams, who went to run in the Greatwood and ran extremely well. He was 5th, and he ran in snatches, and he's got so much ability, Coast Guard Station. He then went to do what he does best, which is chasing. And he went in a race where he shouldn't have run so well, and he went to the Calico race at Cheltenham. And if you watched him throughout, you'd think, oh, well, who is that travelling so well 4 out? And he continued to travel so well. And then he put in his flat spot, and then he ran on again behind Calico. And I thought, here we go. Wait for you, put you in the tracker. And he came out at Aintree, and he ran against Imperial Saint. And he was on a bit of his ratty, fussy mood day, but he has headgear on, and I thought, oh, he's going to drop him. He tried to drop himself out completely, but somehow he was cajoled back into the race. And then when the race was all over and Imperial Saint has gone on to win it, there, lo and behold, Coast Guard Station is running past tired horses. Now, Henry Oliver has decided to put him back over hurdles. The key thing here is he's, I think, exploiting the hurdle rating, because he's much highly rated over chases. He's dropped down in hurdles because of the Hexham. He's down to 114, and add to the fact that we're going to get £7 out of the saddle, courtesy of a conditional that is absolutely flying in Callum Pritchard. You would have seen him have that wonderful ride on Our Dancer in the Badger Beers Chase. He is aboard, and that £7 now makes Coast Guard Station's rating look amazing in the sort of comparison, in the whole context of this race. He will run in snatches, he will have an attitude, but off of with that £7 claim, this is an ideal opportunity to see whether he's going to be giving enough Coast Guard Station, or Henry will just give up with him and put him over chase fences again. But this isn't ideal. And of course, everything else is going on, and people might miss out the fact that here he is.
Yeah. Interesting one, and no prices yet, but I think on the tissues he's around 10 to 1, so it could be a nice each way price for that one as well. And we'll go on to your last highlight on Saturday's 3:20 in Newcastle. I think, was it Neon Moon for David Pipe?
This is more of a fairy tale. This is more sentiment than anything, and regarding Conor O'Farrell, who takes the mount. And poor old Conor was out of the saddle for many months due to having a fall at Market Race and a shoulder injury. And when I saw, because it was a while for quite a few of the jockeys to be jocked up, because there's so much great racing, that some of the jockeys had to. And when I saw Conor on board, I thought ideal, because back in 2012, Conor won this race for David Pipe on Junior, and he's ridden 81 winners for David Pipe. And Neon Moon is a really nice sort. Now, Connor's had, I'm looking down here, he's had just 46 rides since he's been off the track for 6 months. He's had 12 places from them, 46 rides and 2 winners. So he's done well, all things considered. But look how good Neon Moon is. He won a lovely race at Chepstow, in the fact that the further they went, the better he went, and ideally he raced through the line. Did Neon Moon? I'm getting distracted. And yeah, he raced through the line. Yeah, we got a tail. Then he went. Then he went on to go to Ascot. Sorry about this, everyone.
Wants to have their
Sorry. Then he went on to run at Ascot behind Chianti Classico, and for one moment, because Chianti Classico had said such a tempo off of top 8, I thought that the way that Neon Moon came through his race at Chepstow, he was going to come through his race again at this race again at Ascot behind Chianti Classico, who has been touted to go on, and understandably, to do miles better things. Understandably, because Chianti Classico carried top weight 12 stone on that occasion. So Neon Moon, he's another one where this is a race full of dour stayers. If you look at the rest of the field, there's an Ida winner in there. There's Blackjack Magic, who's won the Badger Hours himself. The big danger they're all dangers, but I'd be worried about Bow to Greatness, because that ran really well against Kim Bailey horse recently at Newbury. They really did go at each other recently at Newbury. But Neon Moon, though, the further he goes, his jumping gets slicker and quicker. And this Newcastle track will bring out the best of him. And I'm thinking that maybe David Pipe's thinking the same sort of route as Junior, going further and further. And he might have in his mind the Ida himself. So this might be a thought to go over much further with Neon Moon, because he seemed that was a bit too short from at Ascot the other day.
Another nice one. Kind of a bit outside the box, I suppose. On Saturday again, it could be one that's a little bit forgotten about. The last race in Newcastle, yes. The 320 Neon Moon, around 7-1 there. So not a bad price about that one. I just want to give a quick mention to a couple of the races in Fairyhouse as well. Seems a pity not to give him a mention. I suppose that beginner's chase to start off with looks like a cracking race. Imperi Pass making his chasing debut. Again, one Willie was really keen on during the week, but like you've got the likes of Answer to Cave, Waterford Whispers for Henry de Bromheads. They were 2nd and 4th in the Martin Pipe. That form looks really strong with better days ahead after coming out recently and winning a really good beginner's chase as well. So it's definitely one to have the notebooks out for. Maybe Imperi Pass might be hard to beat on debut, but there's a few really interesting ones who could follow him home there potentially. So one to definitely watch. And then one who I actually quite fancied in Fairyhouse, the 12:45. I just thought the jockey booking, I suppose, might have been the most eye-catching thing about it. It's the 12:45's 2 mile 1 handicap chase. I thought interesting that American Mike makes a massive step down in trip after kind of disappointing in the Troy Town, I suppose, under Jack Kennedy. Back to 2 mile 1 here after trying that marathon trip. But very, very interesting that Jack actually takes the ride on the big chap for Paul Flynn. Instead of riding American Mike, you'd imagine he would have had the choice of that for Gordon Elliott. And Jack doesn't take an awful lot of outside rides either. And when he normally does, it's probably worth keeping an eye on it. I think this is a really progressive horse for Paul Flynn. He's gone up, I think, around 11 pounds in the last month after 2 really good wins in Limerick and Goran. But I'd say it mightn't be the end of his winning yet. Potentially his best form has come over this trip as well. He actually won his beginner's chase over 2 miles. Caused a massive upset that day, beating my mate Mozzie, who ended up being a 150 odd rated chaser. The big chap was 50-1 that day, but won well. And since then, he's kind of gone from strength to strength. In fairness, he ran really well in a 2 mile handicap chase at the Leopardstown Christmas Festival last year as well. Most recently, he ran over 2 miles at Goran, beating Gaelic Arc really commandingly. I just think this time of year, I think Paul has said in the past he's not like a real winter horse, so he's getting his ground here. It's probably, I think they're saying it's probably likely to be yielding soft at worst in Fairyhouse at the weekend. He's a horse kind of probably in the form of his life. at a trip he really does well at. Jack Kennedy on board. I think there's plenty to like about the big chap. Obviously no prices yet, but interesting to see what he opens up at. But I just thought that was a really eye-catching one. Yeah, that was my main fancy of the day on Saturday. But look, plenty. We won't go into too much detail. But a dream to share makes his hurdling debut in the 120 maiden hurdle. That's an interesting one to watch. And I suppose the big race in the day, then the Willie Warm hurdle at grade 3, a really interesting one. I found that quite hard to work it out, though, to be honest. Bottler's Secret was a horse I really liked last year, but he was definitely disappointing in Cheltenham last time. Gimme 5, I think, really interesting that he travels over for Harry Durham. I think he just might be a better horse on better ground, potentially. He was obviously beaten by Bottler's Secret in Fairyhouse last year, but that was really testing ground. He reversed that form in Cheltenham, and seeing Michael O'Sullivan booked, been a kind of a tough week for Michael, I suppose, losing the job at Barry Connon. So it'd be nice to see him bounce back. But Cala Conti in there then as well, like on ratings, you imagine she looks quite well in, but probably not one I'm going to have a bet in. But again, a really interesting race in Fairyhouse. But we'll move on. I think Sunday's card is definitely worth putting plenty of focus on, Tanya. And we were both saying it looks a cracker. And I think the first race we'll chat about, big handicap chase, the 105 to Porterstown, marathon handicap over the 3 mile 5. Favori de Shamdu tops the weights there for Gordon Elliott and Carl Miller. Obviously a really classy one to bring into this. I think he was a grade 3 or grade 2 winner last time? But interesting, Jack Kennedy actually doesn't ride him. He rides the one just below there where it all began for Gordon as well. But we were kind of both saying it's likely the Cork national form could come to the fore here. We've got the first 3 home in that race. Very similar conditions here. I think they were only split by about half a length that day, if even, maybe even less than that. So that form looks key. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was keeping an eye out which horses that Gavin Cromwell would declare, and I know he had Melina Girl entered, but alongside Peaches and Cree, he's gone with Peaches and Cree because I was sort of weighing up Cork national form and Melina Girl. Now I've got to focus on Cork national form, and as you said, they fell across the line together. It was a fabulous race. It was in the end between Spargo and Positive Thinker, and the selection for me in this race, which is Outside the Door. You just didn't want any of them to lose. Outside the Door is in confirmation the smallest of them, but Outside the Door comes to the race with immense consistency, keeps pulling it out, keeps improving with every run at the moment. And I think there's further improvement to come, because when you watched Outside the Door, between the third and the last had it all to do still, and yet did the most enormous jump over the last. And as they went to the line in that fabulous 3-way finish, I sense that there was more to come. I think that Outside the Door will certainly be suited to this race again. You could see that there's going to be 5 or 6 involved in the finish in a race such as this, but with those consistent lines of form, because you could pick winning form out of each and every one of this. History of Fashion was second in the race last year. Outside the Doors is 3-1-1-3. You mentioned Favois de Champeau at the top of the field. That was brave in its victory last time out. And of course, I've gone for Grandiro Bello in the Coral Gold Cup. Now, if that goes well, keep an eye out for My Immortal, because My Immortal was part of the Galway race, and I think My Immortal has been declared for this. So yeah, number 3 on the card, Sean Flanagan on My Immortal. And that ran against and was behind Grandira Bella. So that might spur it on, that only for placings, because that's got a lot to do. But looking at the race, I just think it's going to be a rerun of that Cork National, which was fantastic. Wouldn't it be great if you saw the 3 of them fall across the line again together? And I'll go with... It was a killer. Yeah, outside the Door again, because I just think this little horse, I call it little, it's very diminutive, and it's amazing how it gets over these fences quicker and slicker than some of the bigger rivals. I'll go with Outside the Door. Aidan Kelly is aboard, going to claim 5, but there's plenty of excellent jockeys in this race, but this one continues to improve.
Yeah, he was well fancied for the Cork National that day as well. Yeah, that form, like just the conditions are so similar. That was 3 mile 4. This is 3 mile 5.
Yeah.
Ground's probably likely to be very similar as well. So yeah, you can see that. I found it really hard to split the first three. I watched the race back a few times this morning. Look, I can definitely see the case for outside the door, like you just made. But one who I thought, look, I think the worry is he is making his seasonal reappearance, but possibly could be a nice price for this. Obviously, don't have prices yet, but could be a little bit maybe forgotten about. Daily present for Paul Nolan and Sean O'Keefe. We haven't seen him since he pulled up in the Irish National last year, but he's definitely a horse with a bit of class. Kind of going back to his novice hurdling days, he actually beat Braun in Nagle back in March 22. Off level weights, Braun actually went on to win a grade 2 hurdle the next day, ended up being kind of a mid 150s chaser. Went on to a grade 1 then next time. Might have been a little bit of an ask, I suppose, didn't really work out. But he missed a year then, and whether it was by accident or design, he had a couple of quiet runs in beginners chases, worked out quite well. Then he won on handicap debut in Down Royal, beating none other than Positive Thinker, which kind of ties him a little bit into that Cork National form. He was given Positive Thinker £10 that day, I think, including the jockey's claim on the second horse over 3 miles, which was no mean feat on his handicap debut at all. He was set at kind of tough enough task, and I think the next 2 times he ran the Kim Muir behind I Know the Way You're Thinking, and he pulled up then in the Irish National, like I mentioned. Look, this is obviously a really competitive race as well, but it's definitely calmer waters than the likes of a Kim Muir or an Irish National. So it's probably an ask on seasonal reappearance, but I think this is definitely a classy horse who's well capable of winning again off that mark of 125. Whether or not how ready Paul Nolan has him for this, look, it's probably maybe a bit of a clue in itself that he starts him off in a race like this. He probably could have gone for something quieter, but I think Daily Present, if he's there at a nice each way price, he's definitely worth the bet, because he's a horse with plenty of class, and 125 probably looks like a mark that he's well able to win off again. So he was my pick in that one. But we'll go on then to the grade 1s of the day. The 135, I think, is the first one we'll chat about, the Royal Bond. 9 runners in here. Again, a nice one for the each way punter. Romeo Coolio, though, is 11 to 10 favourite here for Gordon Elliott and Jack Kennedy. Second in the Cheltenham bumper, obviously, and won what was probably, albeit a weak enough maiden hurdle Down Royal, but he was really, really stylish in doing so. But Willie has definitely shown a few in here to try and burst the party. I think Willie has 5 in here. I think, yeah, 5 of those, but probably none of his big shots. It's fair enough to say, Tanya. So this could be a nice opportunity for Romeo Coolio, do you think?
It certainly could be, and as you mentioned, you could not have been more impressed by that slick win. He was 2 to 13, but he couldn't have done it any quicker or any smarter, and he looked the complete article. His hurdling was great. There didn't seem to be any issues, or you think, oh, that needs tidying up. He looks to have it all. He's already, when you look at head to the markets for the festival in March, he's one of the leading protagonists already. Just after a win in the maiden hurdle at 2 to 13, he's main protagonist for the Supreme. So it shows you on how highly he's held in regard. Now, however, that was excellent, and I respect all that. But we've seen Bleu de Vassy do it already against some really competitive rivals, which I always appreciate and like seeing. And also Bleu de Vassy made a couple of errors, which I like seeing, because I like seeing errors being made under pressure, because at the moment Romeo Coolio was able to go over the hurdles. Nothing was alongside. It was able to kick on. And normally when you see errors made is when horses jump alongside or you're trying to catch up horses. Well, Romeo Coolio had none of that. Bleu de Vassy has been in the intense pressure cooker of a grade 3 and come out and won at Navan against some really nice individuals, so has proven it at grade 3 level. And it's amazing to think that it's such a fair price against stable companion Romeo Coolio, but they wouldn't be that far out in disparity, would they? I always like siding with proven form, which Bleu de Vassy has going in a little bit higher level, but I do appreciate how amazing Romeo Coolio did look, because that was just like a top class Cheltenham Festival winner coming out making its debut before it goes into the higher grade from Romeo Coolio. But for value, I would be more siding with Gordon's other runner, with Sam on board. It was a wonderful day that day at Downrow. I think Gordon had loads and loads of winners. They were just every race. I think Gordon was firing in a winner. I do look at, you like Bellocchio for Willie. That I don't know what happened at Ascot, but that was on the flat. That was against Kyprios. The run before that, though, at Punchestown, where just pulled away from the field. To me, Bellocchio looks as though it needs further, perhaps. I'll probably be proved wrong and it'll scoot clear, but it looks as though Bellocchio will be a very, very super horse over that little bit further, maybe a 2.5 miles rather than the 2 miles. And
Yeah,
some of the others is a nice horse, but I'd stick with Bleu de Vassy because of value, and I'll bow down to those. And if Romeo Coolio wins by a mile, I won't be surprised. But value, Bleu de Vassy.
Yeah, I was really taken by Bleu de Vassy in Navan as well, I have to say. I'd say he maybe even surprised them a bit. Like, obviously on bumper form, he can't really compare to Romeo Coolio, but I just thought the comments as well after he won were very interesting. He's a big horse, but they were saying like he just absolutely hates very soft or heavy ground. So he got his ground in Navan. And I thought he showed a real good turn of foot, like you said, against a quality field in that grade 3 as well. Yeah, I agree. He's done more than Romeo Coolio so far, but definitely the vibes seem to be from the Elliott camp that Romeo Coolio would be his superior. But again, like you said, Bleu de Vassy has it proven, so I can definitely see the case for him. I was really impressed with that win the last day as well. So Bleu de Vassy maybe could be the value bet against Romeo Coolio in the Royal Bond. But we'll go on to the 205 then, the Drinmore, again another one that Gordon likes to target, and he's got I think who he's saying is his best novice chaser over the shorter trips anyway, in Firefox under Jack Kennedy. Look, Gordon has won this in the past with the likes of Mighty Potter and Envoy Allen, and he's speaking of Firefox as one who could be even potentially a better chaser than a hurdler. He was no slouch as a hurdler, I suppose. Competing in all those top grade ones, but they seem really, really keen on him this year. But I think Henry is showing a really strong challenge at this Heartwood. I suppose a novice for now. I think his novice status runs out next week, so he's getting his last chance at this grade 1 win in novice company. But like, he has all the experience over the Elliott runner, beat Corbett's Cross last time in Wexford. Could be a tough enough one here for Firefox to crack, I think, Tanya, could he?
I can't believe Firefox is the price he is, because the Heartwood race where the Corbett's Cross, Buddy One went 1 million mile an hour. Just not that fast, but obviously went too quick for Buddy One and set the race up for it. The pair sat behind, and it happened to be Heartwood who had a nice low weight, as it were. So Buddy One just shot off in front, and then with about 2 or 3 to jump, collapsed in the respect of, oh, I've gone off too fast, and handed the baton over to Heartwood, who had to, receive weight from Corbett's Cross. So he's done it nice enough, but when you read who Firefox, and when you watch all the replays, because for the fighting fifth, and you see Mystical Power, and then you realise Firefox is just tucked in behind each time, and just short of pace each and every time. But that's in grade 1s. I say short of pace. It was beat second both times in grade 1s behind Mystical Power, and then jumping over these fences, which he treated with absolute contempt. It was, for him, it was great fun. However, the commentators seemed really intent on telling you how wonderful Mossy Fen Park ran, whereas the reality was Firefox has run this spectacular chase race for me at Downrow. Once again, the day where he had Romeo Coolio, Gordon, but Firefox sort of sent a signal out. But I think everyone's remembering that Firefox was, say, seconds in group 1s or fourth or third in grade 1s over hurdles, where he is a grade 1 performer, and with real speed. real speed, and he was able to adapt and was so agile at Down Royal. For me, he's as you mentioned, Drimore Chase. Gordon Elliott's won it 7 times overall, and it's such a pointer to very, very good horses. Indeed, last year threw up a Grand National winner. I don't think Firefox is that. I don't think he'll stay that distance, but for me, he's the selection.
Yeah, he does. I think when I was looking at this morning, he might have been odds on, but 5 to 4 at the moment with some firms.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I won't be having a bet in it, to be honest. But there is,
Yeah.
like, I am actually a massive fan of Henry's other runner, Gorgeous Tom. Look, he'd have to improve an awful lot to beat a Firefox, but I think he's one to keep an eye on down the line. It'll be interesting to see how he runs in this. I was kind of thinking of him as potentially one for that, the change the turners into the handicap. He could be one for that. I was really impressed that he's running Cork the last day. He'll definitely have to improve an awful lot to be Firefox, but definitely one and keep an eye on, I think, maybe further down the line. But yeah, Firefox, probably the one to beat in the Drinmore to keep the roll going for Gordon Elliott. But we'll go on to the 240 next. I think the big one of the day, the Bar 1 racing. Hatton's Grace Hurdle, Grade 1. I suppose Punchestown's loss last week is definitely Fairyhouse's gain, because we needed Lossy out in this one to make it a competitive race. And even with 4 runners, it's a really, really interesting affair. Tiupu, I suppose, bidding to emulate the achievements of Honeysuckle and Apple's Jade and becoming a 3-time winner of this race. But the mare is going to be hard to crack. I think it's going to be fascinating tactically as well. Tiupu likes to sweep late in this. That's how he's caught his last few rivals in it. But look, Tanya, I suppose the vibes around Lossy Mount are really strong from Willie's camp. She was brilliant last year, but it's a tough ask to beat Tiupu in this race, which he loves so much, isn't it?
Oh, definitely so. 2.5 miles against the man himself, Tiupu. He's won 4 Grade 1s, and so has Lossy Mouth. As you mentioned, he's tried to be the 5th horse to win this 3 times. He's proved that he's a real legendary superstar now. He's won the Stayers, he's won the Champion Stayers as well, going on to Punchestown. He's a superstar, and it's like the brawn and the muscle of Tiupu and the slick speed of Lossy Mouth. Now, she was a non-runner, obviously, due to a stone bruise, and there was this great debate, wasn't there, of are you State Man or Lossy Mouth on the race that she could have gone on. Now, there's sort of that kind of debate is muted here, and it shouldn't be. Are you Lossy Mouth or Tiupu? Because when you watched State Man be beaten by Brighter Days Ahead, now we've got a new player in this whole market, and knowing now Gordon with the strength of Brighter Days Ahead, now Tiupu, his team at the moment is absolutely flying. I'd have to stay with Tiupu, and I could hear people nagging and saying, but she's going to get the allowance. She has the allowance, and I'm thinking, but Tiupu has at the moment the strength and the brawn. Not that she doesn't, but it's over 2.5 miles as well. I just think that this is his domain already. This is already his domain. This is his race. This is his. There's not a time of the year that it isn't for him. And I just wonder. It's going to be a fascinating battle. It's one that I sit back and enjoy. I would be with the hardened Tiupu rather than Lossy Mouth. Yeah, it's quite silly because I would have had last week with the allowance with State Man. I'd have always gone with Lossy Mouth against State Man, but I just feel he's sort of more stronger. He's more versatile in the fact that he could have gone 2 miles. And he can go obviously further than 2.5. He's a superstar.
Tactically, you'd imagine Gordon's kind of 2 up the top there, Beacon Edge, Maxim, one of those will probably cut out the running. Do you think Jack will be kind of trying to bounce late again, or might he kind of maybe be hoping to make this a real test of stamina and play into his own hands? Because we know Lossy Mount, look, she stays at 2.5 obviously, but she's a real a real turn of foot. It could be a real cat and mouse between Jack Kennedy and Paul Townend here, couldn't it?
It could be. There's Beacon Edge, who ran brilliantly at Wetherby, and Beacon Edge could be out there at early doors. But in these sort of scenarios, I just crack out in front and get on with it. You know, come and get me.
Yeah.
I know you've got an allowance, but I'm not going to be found wanting to be going over even further. So you come and get me. And then it'll be fascinating. I don't want to complicate things and play cat and mouse when you've got they'll obviously have different ideas, but I always say just crack out in front and see what happens, and then we're ready for you next time if we get that wrong.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating watch. I'm in the Lassie Mount camp here, I have to say. I think getting the weight, obviously Tiupu, I suppose last year was kind of maybe a similar situation. The young kind of Mullins champion hurdle pretender Imperi Pass kind of got his dreams cracked a bit by Tiupu, but I'd say Lassie Mount would be probably a level ahead, the likes of an Imperi Pass in this division. We know she stays the 2.5 miles. Even the ground, look, maybe Tiupu maybe isn't as ground dependent as we maybe pinned him on. Like, he obviously won and punches down on nice ground, but you know, if it was a bit softer, I think it would probably play more into Tiupu's hands. I think Lassie Mount could be a big danger to him here, getting his 3 in a row, but it'll be a fascinating watch. I'll be in the camp of Lassie Mount, and Tanya is with the old champion Tiupu. I think we've covered the majority of the racing there now for the 2 days. A long enough show, but we got through it all well enough. Tanya, before we go, I'll ask you for your nap of the weekend, though.
Well, JP McManus this weekend is at this stage, I think he's got 12 runners on Saturday, and I think there'll be more than one visit to the winners' enclosure. Certainly, that's the case. And don't forget to look out for Genoa, the wonderful fairy tale in that JP allows that to carry the Peter O'Sullivan silks in Sir Peter O'Sullivan's, the race named after him. So look out for that. That is owned by JP. But the nap of the weekend would have to be in the 154 at Newbury, and that is in JP's colours, and that is Impose Trois, who ran some mighty races last year, including a third in the Lanzarote, which was the last time we saw Impose Trois. If you think that sometimes Mystical Power has to tidy up the jumping, Impose Trois, Hope, has tidied up the jumping no end, because that's where he's lost his last couple of races. He was excellent at Cheltenham, where he won, beating Donica, but then he went to Ascot against he filled up a 1-2 for Nicky Henderson. He ran against Lucia, but he hurdles, and then he lands on the top of the hurdle and he flattens them, and he loses a length or a couple of lengths each time, and he only got beat a neck there. And it wasn't for the fact that he hasn't got any ability. He seems to treat hurdles with contempt. And then he went to the Lanzarote, and he'd done all that down the back straight again at Kempton. And by the time he's then got into contention, a brilliant ride by James Bowen to bring him round on the inside in the Lanzarote, his race was done, because he expended all the energy trying to pick up JJ Riley and Nemean Lion. Well, Nemean Lion then went on to win a Grade 2 at Wincanton after that. But we didn't see him post well, because, of course, that might have been one of the many Nickies that we didn't see because he was out of form. So perhaps good that he isn't. But he comes into this race at Newbury, and he seems to be on a tremendous mark. He's still over hurdles. James Bowen's on board. Don't worry about that. James Bowen's ridden him before, because obviously Nico has to be in the fighting the 5th at Newbury. And once again, this is kind of a race where I think some of these rivals have got ratings that are nearing the ceiling. We don't know how good Impose Trois can be. And this probably, for me, would have to be the nap. I know it's favourite. I don't often go, but I just think that it ran so well last season, despite being horrendous at the hurdles. I think Newbury offers up the ability to recover after each hurdle, and I think that the schooling and everything make him slicker. And JP's I think the green and gold are going to have more than one winner, shall we say.
It could be a big weekend for JP. Yeah, and even though he's favourite 7-2, 130, still not a bad price in the 154 at Newbury on Saturday. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to go Grandero or Bello each way in the in the big one, the Coral Gold Cup. I think, you know, we've kind of made the case from early. I think he's progressive. He still has plenty to improve, and I think that run in Galway definitely is a standout. You know, Stutzikini coming out with the Troytown afterwards, giving him weight. His novice form was good, obviously missed a lot of time, but he seems to be back on the right track now, and seemed to have been a long-term plan as well for the Harties going for this one. So we were both on his I think 20-1 each way, Grandeo Bello in the big one on Saturday. But we'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much, Tanya, for all your analysis of all the races throughout the weekend. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're going to have a bet this weekend, make sure to gamble responsibly and make sure to tune back in on Monday for our normal Irish Angle show.